we have Rabbi Wagner put together a special presentation in honor of the 3 weeks. In order to give us a better understanding of the third Beis Hamikdash. This is obviously in accordance with the Haydan of the Rebbe to learn Hilchos Beis Hamikdash during the 3 weeks. I'd like to give the mic to Rabbi Wagner. If anyone would like to check out his website, it's bhmatters.org, correct?
So we'll begin talking about the Beis Hamikdash. We know that the whole concept of the Beis Hamikdash is something which is an extremely central point in Yiddishkeit. Every day we daven at least 3 times a day for the Beis Hamikdash. After every Shmoneh Esrei, we say Yiratzin Milfanecha. We ask Hashem Sheyibane Beis Hamikdash B'meira B'yameinu V'simcha Keinu V'sirasecha. We ask a special tefillah from Hashem that He should build the Beis Hamikdash speedily and put our lot in His Torah. Throughout the day, everything we're looking for so much is all about the Beis Hamikdash. In fact, now we know that we're in the time of the 3 weeks, a time when we're mourning the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and that we're waiting insistently, we're waiting for the immediate rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. Why is it, and what is such an important thing about the Beis Hamikdash? Why is it something which is so central to Yiddishkeit? I mean, we can understand the Beis Hamikdash was a beautiful place. It was an amazing place. Physically, spiritually, everything, it's all amazing. But why is it something that's so central? It's something which just everything about Yiddishkeit is everything goes around this concept of the Beis Hamikdash. There's an interesting story that Chassidim tell, and the Frierdiker Rebbe brings it. The Rebbe brings it very often. A story of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev was the famous lawyer, the famous advocate for the Jewish people, to the extent that he took the place of Malach Michael. He was the advocate for the Jewish people, always found good things to say about the Jewish people. And there's a story that one time, it was a very tough summer, it was a very dry summer. And at that time, many of the people in that place and in that time were farmers. So it wasn't just a question of, in general, the fact that it was a dry summer means that there's not so much food, but it also means there's just nothing, there's no income. It came Matzei Shabbos Slichas, the Matzei Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, his custom was that he was the chazan, as were many tzaddikim, that he was always the chazan for Slichas, especially the Matzei Shabbos of Slichas. He went to the Amud with his talis, he started Ashrei. He finished off Tilas Hashem Yidaber Pi. He said the Kaddish, and as soon as he finished Kaddish, he went into the Olam and he started to dance. Nobody understood what was going on, but who's going to ask questions? The Rebbe is dancing. He's dancing, and he's dancing with an excited, a very uplifted dancing. And as he finishes dancing, he turns to the Yevishter, he turns his eyes heavenward. And he says, Rebbeinu Shalom, you chose yourself the 7th heaven. You've gone up to the highest spiritual place where you're removed from us, at least outwardly. And us, you left down here in this physical world. And then you gave us a Yetzer Hara, which is a Yetzer Hara that only you alone can create. You created the desires of this world that only you alone are able to make. What kind of taina can you have from a Jew? You're up there, down here, you left us with the Yetzer Hara, with the types of Ilam Hazeh. And he turns his eyes to Hashem and he says, Ribono shel olam, Mashcheni acharecha narutza, pull us after you. You have now a few days until Rosh Hashanah that you must give every single Jew a ksiva v'chsima teva. That was the story with Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. The Rebbe very often told this concept, and the Rebbe mentioned the idea that in essence, it would seem that there's a very powerful thing with what Rabbi Levi Yitzchak is saying. If the Eibishter created us and put us in a world where in front of our eyes we were able to see the spirituality, we were able to see godliness, he didn't put that. He put us in a world where godliness is written in the books. And for us, the reality of our world is the physical world. How are we meant to connect to the Eibishter in such a way? And in order to be able to connect to the Eibishter, we were given three things in Olam, Shana, Nefesh, in space, time, and in the creation in human beings. In Olam, in space, the Eibishter gave us a Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash is the place that enables us to connect. In space, it's a place that reveals godliness. In time, he gave us Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos, and especially Yom Kippur, a time when we feel godliness in time. And in people, he gave us a Rebbe, a Nasi of a generation who connects in every generation, a person that connects us to the Eibishter. The Beis Hamikdash is a place that helps us connect to the Eibishter, as we'll see shortly. It gives us the power where there's a space where we can feel godliness, where Hashem's presence can be revealed in the world, and a place where we can elevate ourselves and elevate the physical world to connect it to Hashem. So we're going to explore tonight, Be'ezras Hashem, a little bit about the Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash, the third Beis Hamikdash, what it's all about, what it is that we're waiting for. And for those who want, can check out, we have a website, bhmatters.info. Check it out, and there's a lot more information. There's not that much in the hour and a half that we have that we're able to do, but over there, there's everyday, daily shiurim, etc. about the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash began with the Mishkan. As soon as Hashem chose the Jewish people as his nation, right after Matan Torah, or possibly, there's different opinions, the Rebbe explains at length, the opinion of the Zayar, the opinion of Rashi, whether it was the mitzvah of the Mishkan was already given before Matan Torah or after Matan Torah, but regardless, together with Matan Torah, the Jews were already commanded, make a Mishkan for Hashem. Because as a Jewish nation who was chosen by Hashem to be his nation, together with that, we also need a special place where we can serve him and a special place where Hashem's presence can be Hashem can rest his presence. The Mishkan went together with them for 39 years in the Midbar. Every place they went in Midbar Ha'amim, in the desert of the nations, which we read about yesterday in Parshas Maseh, the 42 travels. The Mishkan came with them to give them the ability to do their mission. And specifically, the Mishkan was made up of krashim. It was these krashim, as you can see, they were able to be taken apart. It was mobile. And like the Torah says, Hashem says, I was walking in a tent. The Mishkan was something temporary. It wasn't set in the world, but the Mishkan had a different mission. The Mishkan was there to draw down godliness in order to overpower the negativity of the world. And that's why the Mishkan was also made in the same manner as the spirituality of the world, as the godliness that comes into the world. The highest part of the Mishkan, as you can see, was the animal skins that was on top of it, that was on the roof of the Mishkan. That's the world of Chai, the world of living creatures. Under that, there was the Krashim. The walls of the Mishkan were made out of wood. Wood is the world of Tzemeach, the world of vegetation. And the floor of the Mishkan was made of earth. That shows on all the three worlds. Chai is the world of Bria. Tzemeach is the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation that grows, like the emotions of a person that grow from small to bigger. And the lowest part is the earth, the inanimate. That's the world of Asiyah. Especially they had the Aron. The Aron is the most basic part of the Mishkan where Hashem rests his presence. They would carry the Aron with them wherever they went. And in fact, even when they went into Eretz Yisrael, the Mishkan still served throughout the wars that the Jews fought. The Mishkan served as something which brought down the godly energy in order to overpower the negative forces of the world and enable us to afterwards be able to do our mission, which is now a world which the Aron used to go ahead of them in the Midbar. He used to get rid of all the snakes and the scorpions, which that signifies all the klippa, all the negative forces in the world, in order to enable us to do our job of bringing godliness in the world and connecting to Hashem. Once the Jewish people arrived in Eretz Yisrael, they were already settled. They weren't yet settled in the land for the 14 years that they were conquering Eretz Yisrael. They still had the same Mishkan that was there in the Midbar. The Mishkan that they had had in the desert for 39 years, after the first year, that's when they built it. They now had it for another 14 years. It was established in this one place in Gilgal, the first place that they arrived. But it wasn't yet something more than a Mishkan. It was still the same thing. In fact, the Aron, they used to take it out to war with them. It didn't sit in its place. It didn't remain in its place. It still had the mission of enabling the godly energy to come into the world, and as such, enabling the future mission of the Jewish people, that they should be able to do what has to be done, because in order to do that, they first had to overpower the negativity that there is in the world. That was the Mishkan of the first 14 years in Eretz Yisrael. Once they conquered, and now they had Eretz Yisrael, and they split it up, now they came to Shiloh. Shiloh is called Menucha. It's a resting place. It wasn't yet a Beis Hamikdash, but it had a certain aspect of being established. The idea of Shiloh was it was built, this picture is a picture which depicts the concept. It may not be exact, but the general idea is that Shiloh was built of stone. It was covered. The roof was the same yeriyos, the same animal skins that were used in the Mishkan and the Midbar, because it wasn't yet settled. It was still a place that was already semi-permanent. They already had a stone structure. The Aron already had a home. And they had a place where they came to bring korbanos, where they came to serve Hashem. That was Shiloh that lasted for 369 years, which is a long time compared to the fact that the Beis Hamikdash itself lasted 410 years. That was the structure. The Aron had a place from all over Eretz Yisrael. They would come there. But it still wasn't yet fully a place for Hashem to rest his presence. After Shiloh was destroyed, when Eli died, and when the Aron was captured by the Plishtim, They now came to Noiv and to Givon, which together lasted 52 years. Noiv and Givon were two places that once again they built, according to the Rambam. There's two opinions. Was it a stone structure or was it the same Mishkan that was in the Midbar? But according to the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, it was a stone structure. It did not have the Aron because the Aron had been captured by the Plishtim and it was not returned to its place at that time. But it was still a structure with a certain aspect of permanence, although not fully, it was still a Mishkan. Now, before we go on to the Beis Hamikdash and understand the concept of the Beis Hamikdash and with what it differed than its predecessors in Shiloh even, and in Noiv and Givon, and definitely in the Mishkan and the Midbar. Let's look at the halacha in Rambam, which comes from the Gemara, the following. From the Sifra brings it, the following idea. Gimel mitzvahs nitztavu Yisrael b'chnisasan la'aretz. When the Jewish people came into Eretz Yisrael, when they came into their own land, when they became established as a nation in their own land, they were commanded three things. Number one is lemanis lahem melech, to appoint a king. A nation is a nation when the nation has a king. When they asked wrong, when they asked for shol. But the Torah says, Saim tasim alecha melech. In order to be an established nation, there must be a king. Number two, lim chayzari shel Amalek. They must destroy the offspring of Amalek, but which also includes become settled, get rid of all the enemies all around. Number three is livna Islam Beis Abchira, build the Beis Hamikdash. When can they build the Beis Hamikdash? When they're established. For Hashem to have an established home, the Mishkan was a tool to bring them, to enable them to get to where they needed to get. In the Mishkan, in a certain sense, there was a higher revelation of godliness. But it wasn't yet the ultimate purpose of giving Hashem a place down here in this world. It was only enabling the people to have a tool, to have the power of the Aron, to have the power of bringing down godliness in order to prepare the way for when they would finally be able to do what they needed to do. But in order to be able to know that they're established, even on the physical sense, there needs to be a king, there needs to be getting rid of the enemies around, and then they can build an established home from Hashem once they're established. Now, in fact, it's interesting that the Rebbe points out that the Mishkan as well had all these, the other two things before it. Before they built the Mishkan in the desert, they had a king. Moshe Rabbeinu was like a king. The Rambam says that in a certain sense, Moshe Rabbeinu had the halacha of a king, in a certain sense. They had the war against Amalek. It wasn't the full-fledged getting rid of Amalek, but there was the war against Amalek before they built the Mishkan. And then they were able to build a Mishkan. But none of these were complete. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't a full-on king. He was a leader and he was called a king in certain aspects. They didn't fully get rid of Amalek, and therefore they didn't either fully have a full Beis Hamikdash. When they came to Eretz Yisrael, Yeshua is the one who set up Shiloh. Yeshua had more of a status of king than Moshe Rabbeinu, because Yeshua wasn't just a king, he was appointed as a king by the bestin of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yeshua already led the Jewish people in war against their enemies, where they conquered the enemies around. And therefore now they were able to build a more established place in Shiloh. Still not a proper Beis Hamikdash. Still not properly established, because it still wasn't a full-on king from Malchus Beis David. They still hadn't properly gotten rid of their enemies around, and therefore they still couldn't build a proper Beis Hamikdash. Shmuel was also considered a king, or Shaul, who was a king, built Noiv and Givon, also fought a war against Amalek, also built an established place, not yet fully. Only later, when David HaMelech came, and then his son Shlomo, when they had a full-on king, when they were at peace with all the enemies, they had gotten rid of all of their enemies from around. Now they can build a proper Beis Hamikdash. That was another thing in the deeper concept of it. The Beis Hamikdash, the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash is to bring down Hashem's presence in the world. In order to bring down Hashem's presence in the world, there has to be three things, and in this order. Number one, appoint a king. The king is the one who enables every Jew to accept Hashem's kingship. And that's why Moshe was the first one who built the Mishkan, because Moshe was the one who connected every Jew with das, with a knowledge of Hashem. But that's the mission of every king. As a king, as the Tzemach Tzedek explains, the idea of a king is to bring down godliness into the world, to enable every Jew to connect to Hashem. Number two is to get rid of all of those things that oppose the Shekhinah, that oppose Hashem. That's the idea of getting rid of a malik. A malik is the greatest opposition to Hashem's name. Now you can build a Beis Hamikdash. Hashem can have an established home in the world. Now let's get to the Beis Hamikdash. But before we go to the Beis Hamikdash, let's look at a very interesting Gemara in Pesachim. The Gemara says the following. Rabbi Lazar says, "Mai dichsiv." Why does the pasuk say? The pasuk says in Yeshaya, "V'holchu amim rabim." In the future, in the time of Mashiach, many nations will go v'amru, and they'll say, "Lechu v'nale el har Hashem el beis Elokei Yaakov." Let us go up to the mountain of Hashem, to the home of the God of Yaakov. Asks the Gemara, Elokei Yaakov v'lo Elokei Avram v'Yitzchak. When the nations of the world say we would like to go to the Beis Hamikdash, to where Hashem's presence is, they say we want to go to the place where the God of Yaakov is. Is he only the God of Yaakov and not the God of Avram and Yitzchak? Why, with regards to the Beis Hamikdash, and specifically the third Beis Hamikdash, why do we use the term that it's connected to the God of Yaakov? Ella, however, says the Gemara, this is with regard specifically to the third Beis Hamikdash. Like Avram shekasav b'har. It's not like Avram, which Avram called the Beis Hamikdash a mountain. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, Asher Yomer Hayom b'har Hashem Yireh. Avram Avinu went to the place of the Beis Hamikdash where there was the Akedah of Yitzchak. He said, "This is the mountain of Hashem." We say that's not enough. That doesn't suffice, as we'll explain shortly. Not like Yitzchak, who called the Beis Hamikdash a field. Shenemar, Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basada. When Yitzchak went to daven, he went to daven in the field. What was that field? That was the place of the Beis Hamikdash. Still not enough. It's rather like Yaakov, who called the Beis Hamikdash a house. He called the place the house of Hashem. The third Beis Hamikdash is called Beis Elokei Yaakov because the third Beis Hamikdash is not like Avram and not like Yitzchak, but rather like Yaakov. Let's look at how that expresses itself in the Beis Hamikdash. The first Beis Hamikdash, spoke earlier, Shiloh was called Menucha. The Mishkan was called V'ayeh Mishalich B'ayel. The Mishkan was called a tent, a temporary dwelling place of Hashem. It had no permanence. It was something which was there for a different purpose. The purpose wasn't in it itself. The Mishkan moved. We can imagine who knows how many places that if we go in the deserts on the way to Eretz Yisrael, who knows how many places the Mishkan actually was there. You can go there today and it's sand, it's nothing. There's no holiness. The Mishkan was there. Kodesh HaKodashim was there. The Aron was there. Nothing. Because that wasn't the point. It was there to move and to accomplish a purpose of enabling them to get where they needed to get. Shiloh was a little more, was semi-permanent. It was called Menucha, a resting place. Only the Beis Hamikdash is called Nachala. Interesting, the first Beis Hamikdash is actually the sixth place. There was the Mishkan. There was the Mishkan in the desert. There was the Mishkan in the Gilgal. There was the Mishkan in Shilai, the Mishkan in Naiv, and then in Givon. First Beis Hamikdash is place number 6. The first Beis Hamikdash was built by Shlomo HaMelech. David HaMelech already wanted to build the Beis Hamikdash. Hashem told him, you won't build it, your son will build it, but Hashem gave him the Ruach HaKodesh with a blueprint. He told him exactly, this is how I want my Beis Hamikdash to look. Your son Shlomo, who will be a peaceful man, he'll be able to build a place where Hashem can rest his presence. Finally, Shlomo HaMelech came and built the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash built by Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo was the richest of all people. Shlomo was the wisest of all people. Shlomo HaMelech had peace with everyone around him, but we're told also he was Melech B'Kippah. He ruled over the world. He was able to bring people, workers from everywhere. He brought workers from Ethiopia. He brought workers from India. He brought workers from every place in the world that there was. And he brought all the most precious materials from everywhere. And he built the most magnificent home, the most magnificent Beis Hamikdash for Hashem. We'll see soon what there was in Shlomo HaMelech's Beis Hamikdash. This is a general idea, a general drawing of the concept. The Beis Hamikdash, this is the Azara, the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Here you have the Mizbeach. This is the Ulam, which, as we'll learn later, was an extremely tall structure. And this is the Heichal, the 2-floored Heichal of the Beis Hamikdash. Here you have the way the artist depicts the Yam Shel Shlomo. They didn't just have one kiyar in the first Beis Hamikdash, there were 12 kiyaris. So that all 12 kohanim who were involved in the carbon tamid could wash their hands at the same time. But in the second Beis Hamikdash, and as well as in the third Beis Hamikdash and in the Mishkan, there were 12 faucets in the kiyar. In the Beis Hamikdash of Shlomo HaMelech, he had 12 kiyars. They had the great Yam Shel Shlomo, which had a water fountain that was constantly flowing into it, and the water flowed out of it through the Yud Beis Bakar, the 12 copper cattle, that the water flowed through their mouths into the kiyar, and from the kiyar one would wash their hands and feet. One kiyar, as we see, is between the Beis Hamikdash, between the Mizbeach and the Beis Hamikdash, as we'll see and learn. This was the Beis Hamikdash of Shlomo HaMelech. This Beis Hamikdash, we call it Ahar. This Beis Hamikdash is like Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, as you see, was the midah, the attribute of chesed, of kindness. Kindness means drawing down godliness from above. Ahar, a mountain, is God made. A mountain is untouched by man. A mountain is something that when a person sees it, he gets inspired by the vastness. We're told in Chassidus, the word har, later this week, is going to be the yahrzeit of Aaron HaKohen, Rosh Chodesh Av. Aaron HaKohen was buried in Hoir HaHar. Aaron's name has in it the letters har. Aaron is kindness, chesed, drawing down from above. Inspiration. The inspiration, the great godly inspiration, the great spiritual inspiration. That's Avraham, chesed, har. Avraham is bringing down godliness, drawing down godliness into the world. That was the idea of the first Beis Hamikdash, the vast, great home which was prepared by Hashem himself. The blueprints were made by Hashem himself. It was made in the most beautiful way in the world. There were 10 constant miracles that happened there. There was the Arin there. There was the Chayshen there. There was the Urim V'Tumim there. There was 10 miracles every day. When someone came to this Beis Hamikdash, he felt automatically inspired. There was godly revelation in the world itself. And yet, we're told, like Avram Shekroi Har, a mountain is great, it's inspirational, it's spiritual, but it's not it, because the inspiration comes and goes. Spirituality doesn't necessarily come in a way that it transforms us. Sure, the Beis Hamikdash was already a home for Hashem. It was an established home made of stone. Even when it was destroyed, Hashem never left that place. But nevertheless, it was destroyed, because spirituality doesn't necessarily last forever. It still doesn't have it fully. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. They came up from Bavel and they built the second Beis Hamikdash. The second Beis Hamikdash had very humble beginnings. When they came from Bavel, they had 3 prophets with them, Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Chagai, a Navi, came and told them a nevuah, because when they came, they didn't want to build the second Beis Hamikdash. They were afraid. There were enemies all around. There were the Kusim in Eretz Yisrael who they had to stand guard against them the whole time. They only were able to build the Beis Hamikdash with the permission of Kodesh, of the non-Jewish king. In fact, that's why the eastern wall of the Harabais, not this, but the Harabais, had an engraving of Shushan Abira, because the king wanted them to constantly remember that somewhere in the east is where Shushan, and that's where your allegiance lies. The Jews didn't have money. They didn't have the means. They didn't have the power. They built a meager home for Hashem. They built a Beis Hamikdash to their best of their ability. The Navi told them, don't worry, you see this Beis Hamikdash as a nothing. It has humble beginnings, but Gadol Yiyeh Kvoid HaBayis Hazeh Achren Min HaRishon. In the end, this Beis Hamikdash is going to be greater in the physical world than the first Beis Hamikdash. And the Gemara gives us 2 opinions, which both are there, Rav and Shmuel, either because the height, the building, the structure was bigger than the first Beis Hamikdash. The first Beis Hamikdash, the Heichal, from floor till ceiling. The ceiling of the Heichal was 30 ames high, the inside ceiling. In the second Beis Hamikdash, the ceiling was 40 ames high. The Heichal itself was 60 ames in the first Beis Hamikdash, was 100 ames in the second. It was more in the physical world of space and also time. It lasted 10 years more. It lasted for 420 years. It started from the physical world and it remained in a much greater position in the physical world. In fact, eventually when it was refurbished, it says whoever didn't see this building didn't see a beautiful building in his life. It was the most beautiful, breathtaking structure that existed. In the physical world, in the spirituality, it didn't have as much, and perhaps that's also hinted at in the fact that the Ulam was higher in the first Beis Hamikdash. The Ulam has nothing in it physically. The Ulam is spirit. The Ulam is empty, as we're going to learn. In the second Beis Hamikdash, the Ulam was the same size. The first Beis Hamikdash was more drawing down spiritual inspiration. In the second Beis Hamikdash, it was more something established in the world. And yet we're told, like Yitzchak shekasav by Sadeh. Sadeh is a field where you work, where the person works, where the physical person works, like the second Beis Hamikdash, where they had to work to build it, where it came from below and eventually it reaps, eventually it gives fruit, eventually it gives produce. That's the idea of Gvura, elevating from below, and yet that doesn't either last. Why does that not last? Because it's true that you elevate the physical world. In fact, the idea of the second Beis Hamikdash is the concept of Balei Tshuva. The first Beis Hamikdash was the concept of a tzaddik. He's spiritually uplifted. He's on the highest spiritual level. But yet, that tzaddik is not necessarily able to bring it into the world. The Bal Tshuva, which was in the second Beis Hamikdash, they sinned, they messed up, and now they were able to reconnect When you reconnect, you're lifting up your physical existence. You're showing that even in a place of negativity, I could still reconnect to Hashem, even in a place of Avedis. But nevertheless, Bal Tshuva, we're told, has to say Efshi. A tzaddik can say Efshi. When a tzaddik sees something bad in the world, he's able to say, I really want this, I'm only not doing it because Hashem told me. A Bal Tshuva, when he sees evil, he has to say, no, I'm not interested in this. Because if he says Efshi, the bad in him, the evil in him is still there, it still exists, and therefore there is a possibility that it may become reawakened. And that's what happened in the second Beis Hamikdash. It also didn't last. It lasted longer in the physical world. It was missing the spiritual inspiration in the same way. There was no Urim, there was no Urim V'Tumim, but yet that also doesn't last because it's not a full place, which is a keli for the spirituality. The third Beis Hamikdash, which is incidentally the second Beis Hamikdash, was number 7. The third Beis Hamikdash is number 8. The third Beis Hamikdash is called in the Zohar Binyana de Kutchabrichu, the building of Hashem, which lasts forever. The third Beis Hamikdash is going to have both. It comes from above. Banu Yumishuchlol Hu. It is already fully built, and it will be revealed from heaven. And that's why we're told in the Gemara that the third Beis Hamikdash can come down even at night. We're not allowed to put the Beis Hamikdash up at night. It says in the pasuk, "B'yoyim hakim es Mishkan," the day that they built the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash can be built by day, not at night. And yet the Gemara tells us the third Beis Hamikdash can be revealed even at night. And Rashi and Tosfos in the Gemara explain why. Because Banu Mishuchlol Hu, it's already built. All it has to do is be revealed and come down from heaven. In space, it's bigger. Incomparably, as we will see, bigger, larger, more magnificent, more impressive in the physical space than the first and second. In spirituality, it's also much greater and more powerful than the first and second. And that's why we're told, Eloki Yaakov Shikroi Bayis. Yaakov called the Beis Hamikdash a home. A home is an established place in the world. It's there. It brings down its tiferes. It connects higher and lower. It makes both the physical and spiritual become one. When the physical and spiritual become one, it lasts forever. It lasts forever because it doesn't have, it's not only spiritual, which is lacking, which can be destroyed because it doesn't necessarily come down. It's not only physical, which is lacking. It's both together, and therefore it's something that exists and lasts forever and ever. It exists in a way where it changes, where the entire world becomes a Beis Hamikdash. Now let's see when we talk about this Beis Hamikdash. So this Beis Hamikdash is a place where Hashem can rest His presence. He has a home in the physical world. There are 3 Batei Mikdash. The first one is how the Rambam describes the binyan Shabana Shloimeh, the building, the structure that Shloimeh Melech built is Kvar Mefurash B'Melachim. It's described in its fullness. It's described in Sefer Melachim. It describes everything, the measurements of the Beis Hamikdash, and that's how we have some type of idea of the first Beis Hamikdash. The third Beis Hamikdash, v'chein binyan ha'asid libanes, the third Beis Hamikdash, which is going to be built. Afal pishu kasu b'Yecheskel, einoi mefurash mevor. It's described in Yecheskel, but it's not explained fully. Now, a lot of people take this to mean we have no idea anything about the third Beis Hamikdash. That's not true. When we say Einay Mefurash Mevor, that means it's not fully explained, because it will only become fully understood when Mashiach comes and Yigala Hashem Eineinu. Hashem will open our eyes to understand also the secrets and the hidden things in Yecheskel. But much of it is already explained, and much of it we don't fully understand, Neither do we fully understand a lot about the first and the second. How do we have the picture? How do we have the structure, the idea of the third Beis Hamikdash? Yechezkel HaNavi was 10 years after the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Yechezkel HaNavi was in Bavel. It was on Yom Kippur, Yovel year. And Yechezkel had a vision. The Malach came and took him. In his vision, he took him to Eretz Yisrael. He took him to a very high mountain, and the Malach had in his hands a measuring stick. The measuring stick was 1 amma. The measuring stick was 6 ammas long. The measuring stick was 6 ammas long. 6 ammas means 36 tfachim, 36 handbreadths. That's bigger than a regular amma. 1 tefach bigger. That's what was always used in the Beis Hamikdash, a bigger amma. The measuring stick was 6 ammas. He had also a string, so that places where you have to bend, you can measure it also. He gave him a tour of the third Beis Hamikdash. He gave him a tour exact with all the measurements. And he said, Yechezkel, I want you to remember everything I'm telling you. I want you to give the exact description to the Jewish people. Let them learn about the Beis Hamikdash. Let them know it. And we all know the Medrash that the Rebbe quotes so many times. Yechezkel said to Hashem, Yechezkel was a true Jewish leader. Yechezkel turned to Hashem and he said, the Jewish people are in Galus. They can't build a Beis Hamikdash. Why are you telling me to tell them about it now? Let them leave Galus already. Then you can tell them about the Beis Hamikdash. Yechezkel was telling Hashem, take us out of Galus. And Hashem said, you're right. But nevertheless, I want you to understand something. Just because my children are in Galus, which is not a good thing, but does that mean that my home, the Beis Hamikdash, should not be built? Tell them that when they learn about the Beis Hamikdash, it's as if they're actually building it. That was the third Beis Hamikdash. Yechezkel described it precisely. We have Rashi. There's the Tosfos Yom Tov who wrote a sefer called Tzuras HaBayis, the form of the third Beis Hamikdash. And there's the Metzudas, the commentary. Sure, there's different parts where there's questions, where there's not understood things, but there's a lot that is explained. In fact, when they did come out of Galus, V'anshi Bayis Sheni, the people of the second Beis Hamikdash, Kshebanu b'mei Ezra, when they built in the time of Ezra, they built the second Beis Hamikdash. Banu kibinyan Shlomo, they built it like the structure of Shlomo HaMelech, because everything has to be based, when you might make a Beis Hamikdash, it has to be based on the blueprint given by Hashem himself. However, they implemented whatever they could, whatever they understood from Yechezkel. Certain things they didn't implement, and there's always going to be a reason for the things they didn't implement. Either they didn't fully understand it, or there was a different reason why they couldn't implement it. But nevertheless, they implemented various things, as we will see. Now let's look at this. What does this have to do with the Beis Hamikdash? Before we go on to describe the third Beis Hamikdash, there's something that's very important for us to realize. Let's look at this. What's this? A horse and buggy? What's the point and the purpose of the horse and buggy? A person needs to get from point A to point B. Can't walk, or he's not able to walk, or it's not comfortable to walk, or it's too far to walk. He gets on a horse and buggy, it takes him to where he needs to go. As time goes by, we get an invention of the train. Same idea, different thing. It's a different speed, a lot quicker than the horse and buggy, a lot more comfortable than the horse and buggy. Point is the same. I need to get from point A to point B. I can't get there by foot, or it's not comfortable for me to get there by foot. I take a train. We have other things that are created. We have an invention of the car. In fact, take a look at the highway. Chassidus explains the idea of a highway means a road that connects two cities. It connects the Ir Habira, it connects the capital together with this regular city of a people, of regular people. You have cars, you have trucks. It takes you where you need to go. It's connecting the capital with the other cities of the world. The connection is there. You can go from the other cities to the capital, or you can go from the capital to other cities. When you go a little further and you want to go a little quicker, or you want to go a little bit shorter time, a little bit faster, you have the airplane where you can fly in the air and you can get to the place where you need to go. Or if you really want to go far, you can have the rocket ship. All of these are accomplishing the same point. You want to go somewhere. You're not happy where you are. You're not accomplishing what you need to where you are. You need to go somewhere, but you need this mode of transportation to get you there. We live in a world, we're not happy with just living in this physical world, like we told earlier, the story of Rabbi Yitzchak of Raditchev. We need to go somewhere. We need to connect to Hashem. We need to bring the world and elevate it. We need to lift it up from its physical space, and we need to bring it to something more, to a proper accomplishment. How do we do that? We do it through a Beis Hamikdash. We do it through having something, a place where we can bring karbanis, a place where we can lift up the physical existence and elevate it to Hashem. There's different ways of doing it depending what the time is. When the Jews weren't established properly, there was a Mishkan. They came to Eretz Yisrael, they had Shiloh and Noiv and Givon. It came the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, they had that, the second, but the point was all the same. It's the same Beis Hamikdash, just different circumstances. Depending on the circumstances, that's how you're going to accomplish what you need to accomplish. Let's look at it, the same idea. Here's a hut. Why do we need a hut? You need to sleep at night. You want to be protected from the elements. You want to be protected. You want to have a place where you're protected from the wild animals, from everything around. You have a hut, a place where you can sleep and feel protected. From there, you can go to an apartment. It's a small place, but it's bigger than the hut. It's a place which you can call your own. There's two types of an apartment. There's an apartment that you rent. There's an apartment that you buy. An apartment that you rent is still not yours. An apartment that you buy is a place where you feel you can live, but it's still a relatively small place, but it's accomplishing what needs to be accomplished. It's a place to live. It's more than just a hut. You can have a home, a house, which is bigger. You can make parties in the house. You can invite people. You can have a lot more going on in the house. It's a bigger place. Or you can have a palace. You can have a castle, a king, an officer, a minister lives in this bigger place where everything of the government happens over there. The idea of the mall is also the same. It's a place where you can call your own, where you can live, whether it's a small hut or the big castle, which are incomparable one to another, but they're all accomplishing the same thing. Let's think about another idea. In the modes of transportation, in order for you to get where you need to have 3 points. There needs to be 4 wheels or 2 wheels, but there needs to be wheels because without wheels you can't move. There needs to be an engine or a horsepower, something which is going to enable it to move. And there needs to be a place where you can sit, where you can be there. The same thing is with a home. You need to have 4 walls and a roof. Whether it's the hut or the castle, the idea is the same. And it's the same with the Beis Hamikdash. When we look at the Beis Hamikdash, they all need to have the same ingredients, the same concepts which enable us to do what we need to do, to elevate the world to Hashem and to make Hashem a place where He can live. But in that sense, when we now can only make a hut, it's the same Beis Hamikdash as the third Beis Hamikdash. It may be different because it's not fully revealed. But essentially, when we now bring Hashem into our homes, we're actually part of the third Beis Hamikdash, which becomes fully revealed when it's the third Beis Hamikdash. But in the third Beis Hamikdash, it's fully revealed, but it's not just something of the future, it's something which we're connecting to now already. In order to make a place that Hashem's presence can rest in, a place where we can serve Hashem, where we can elevate the world, it has to be done according to Hashem's. Hashem is the one who gives us the picture of how he wants his home to be. He told us, "V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'seicha," make me a mikdash, and he told us how to do it. This is what a mikdash has. It has an inside area, and it has an outside area. Every mikdash or Mishkan or Beis Hamikdash needs that. The inside area has two parts. In the back, on the west, there's the Kodesh HaKadoshim. This is where the Aron is. This is where the Shekhinah is. This is where Hashem rests his presence. In the front, in the inside area, you have a menorah, you have a shulchan, and you have a mizbeach. This is how you serve Hashem in the inner avodah. On the outside area, in the yard, in the courtyard, this is where you have the mizbeach hachitzain, where you bring karbanis and the kir. Every Mishkan, every Beis Hamikdash needs this. Here's the inside area. Here you have the Aron, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and here you have the Kalim with which you serve Hashem. Now, all of these, they represent something. Because as we said, the Beis Hamikdash means to bring down the godly energy into the world. The way the godly energy is brought down is through the 10 spheres, which are godly channels that bring down godliness into the world. In the back, on the west, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you have the Aron. The Aron has inside it the luchos. The luchos are engraved by Hashem's hand. That's the concept of keser. Keser is the essence of godliness. Inside the Aron, you also had either a shelf, or inside the Aron itself, you had the Sefer Torah, which that's the concept of Chachma. And then you have the Aron, which houses them. That's Bina. Bina is understanding. That's what expresses. That's what encases Keser and Chachma. This is in the back. This is the highest part. This is where the essence of godliness is revealed. This is where Hashem's presence is revealed in the west. Then you have a curtain. And then you draw down this godliness into the world, going from west to east, which means from the Aron outward. On your right side, you have the menorah. The menorah is chesed. Chesed is kindness, drawing down the godly light into the world. The menorah is to draw down the godly energy, the godly light. The menorah, in fact, has upside down goblets in the branches of the menorah, which shows that it brings the energy into the world. On the left, as you go out, you have the shulchan, which is gvura. The shulchan is where you put the lechem upon him, the showbread. You elevate the physical world, but it's all part of the inside. It's not that you're dealing with the world itself, it's that you're bringing the world to a place where it can connect to Hashem. And here you have Tiferes, that's the Mizbeach HaKtoros, where you deal with the neshama itself. Smell is a sense of the neshama, that's Tiferes, connection. As you go further, you have in the Beis Hamikdash something that the Mishkan doesn't have. And this is something which is important to remember. You have the Ulam. The Mishkan didn't have an Ulam. We said that the Beis Hamikdash is based on the blueprint of the Mishkan. It's only more established. Why is the Ulam such an essential part in the Beis Hamikdash? There's nothing in this Ulam. It's an empty space. But the Ulam is a place that makes something become established. If you want a home, a proper home has a hallway that leads into it. In the Ulam, you had on the right side the golden table, on the left side the stone table, Netzach and Hod. Inside the Ulam, above the door of the Ulam, you had the golden grapes. It was a golden vine that was planted by Shlomo HaMelech, and in his wisdom, he planted a golden vine which actually gave fruit every year. Besides for that, people actually brought golden grapes, a golden cluster, a golden leaf. If they wanted that their gold in itself should be in the Beis Hamikdash, they brought it there. But we're told, the Yerushalmi says, and Chassidus brings this, that it actually bore fruit. That's Yisoid. Yisoid is what gives fruit. It takes all of the above things, all of the godly energy from above, and it bears fruit. It brings it into the world, which is finally Malchus, the outer Mizbeach, where you elevated the physical world and brought it to Hashem. There's also backwards. Backwards meaning when a person comes in to the Beis Hamikdash, the first place he comes in is into the Azara. The first place he comes in is the courtyard. The first thing he has to do is he has to wash his hands and the feet from the kiyar. When a person wants to come to Hashem, the first thing he needs to do is wash off the dirt of the world. And then he goes to the Mizbeach, he brings a karban on the Mizbeach. The karban on the Mizbeach, which is karban oila, specifically, a person brings his animal, he brings it to Hashem. He gives himself over, he dedicates himself to Hashem, but he's still dealing with his animal. Then he goes up to the steps and he goes into the ulam. The ulam enables a person to take the concepts and to internalize them. When a person goes to daven, before davening, a person thinks about the greatness of Hashem. The ulam is an empty space, a vast space, a place where a person can stop for a moment and think, where am I going? Then he can go into the actual Beis Hamikdash, into the actual Heichal, and the first thing that he reaches, it's in the inner third of the Heichal, is the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach HaKtoides. This isn't like the outer Mizbeach. You're not dealing with animals over here. You're not dealing with physical objects. It's like Shabbos and Yom Tov when a person is in a spiritual state. The outer Mizbeach, the courtyard, is like a weekdays when we're dealing with the world, when we have to wash our hands and feet, when we have to dedicate ourselves to Hashem. Inside the Heichal is like Shabbos and Yom Tov when a person can connect his neshama to Hashem. That's the first thing. Once I connected my neshama to Hashem, then I have on my left, but it's on the right of the Beis Hamikdash, but it's on my left because I have to now dedicate myself, Gvura, to the chesed, to the godly energy that comes down, it's brought down through menorah in spiritual aspects of Torah, and which is intellect, and midas, the emotions, which is why it's 7 branches of the emotions, and it's the light which shows on Torah. On my right side, which is on the left side of the Beis Hamikdash, there's the Shulchan, which is dealing in the spiritual way with physicality, because there still is physicality on Shabbos and Yom Tov, but you're dealing with them in a spiritual way. The Kodesh HaKadoshim is like Yom Kippur. It's 100% pure. The Heichal, unlike the outside of the Beis Hamikdash, where all the utensils were, where the Beis Hamikdash was made of copper or stone, which shows on the physical world itself. In the Heichal, everything was made of gold. The walls themselves were plated by gold. Gold was created for the Mishkan. Gold is the purity of spirituality. But in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, over there's only Hashem and the Jewish people. There's nothing else. And that's the concept of Yom Kippur. Now, when the Beis Hamikdash was built by Shlomo HaMelech, he didn't build it on his own. He got it, HaKoil B'chsav Miyad Hashem Malay Hiskil. David HaMelech had prophecy from Hashem where he was told how the Beis Hamikdash should be built. He gave that over in writing, the blueprints, to Shlomo HaMelech. That's how Shlomo HaMelech decided, and that's how he knew to build the Beis Hamikdash. What was that idea? That was the blueprint of the Beis Hamikdash. In order to build a home for Hashem, it has to be given by Hashem. And therefore, every Beis Hamikdash had to follow this general blueprint. The first, the second, the third, everything had to follow the same blueprint. In the Beis Hamikdash itself, this is actually a model of the third, but they had already in the second as well. They had now the idea of the Ezras Nashim. The Ezras Nashim was a courtyard that was added to the Beis Hamikdash. It's not really part of the Beis Hamikdash in halacha. In the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, or in the time beforehand, the first Beis Hamikdash already, it says, El Chatzer Hashem HaChadash, in the time of Chizkiah, they added certain halachas. They made halachas that the Ezras Nashim should be called on a higher level than the rest of the Harabayis. But according to halacha from the Torah, it is merely the same thing as the Harabayis. Now, let's look at this concept of the Ezras Nashim. The Ezras Nashim is not like the name seems to suggest, the women's gallery. Yes, in the Ezras Nashim, they built in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, they built a porch for the women to watch a Simchas Beis HaSheva. Generally, the Ezras Nashim was a place where people came to daven. If you didn't have a carbon, you just wanted to get inspired, you wanted to connect to Hashem, you came into the Ezras Nashim. It was something Shlomo HaMelech added when he made the Beis Hamikdash, and he knew it would need to be a place where people can always come to daven, and he made it as the Ezras Nashim. It's brought down in Sfarim, an interesting thing, where it's brought down quoting from the Christian books. That over there it says that the Ezras Nashim of the Beis Hamikdash was a place where Goyim came. It is not true. They probably meant in those books, because these were books that were inspired by people in those times, they probably meant the Harabayis, which they called the outer courtyard. In the Harabayis was a place where Goyim would come if they wanted to serve Hashem, if they wanted to connect to the Beis Hamikdash, a Goy could come to the Harabayis, not into the Ezras Nashim. The Ezras Nashim was a place where people came in to daven to Hashem. If you were bringing a carbon, you went to watch your carbon. You either came to one of the gates or you came to watch your carbon. But in here was where you daven to Hashem. It was something that was added by Shlomo HaMelech in the Beis Hamikdash, and we'll see in the second and third Beis Hamikdash. But again, what's important to remember is this is not considered to be part of the Beis Hamikdash. They did add certain halachas in it during the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, during the time of Chizkiah HaMelech, but halachically, especially from the Din Torah, and even when they added, it still remains not part of the Beis Hamikdash. You're allowed to sit in the Ezras Nashim. Things that you're not allowed to do, the karbanis that you can eat inside the Azara, you can't eat inside the Ezras Nashim, etc., etc. Now, let's look shortly, just a little bit, at what happened over here. There was also the Harabayis. Now, the Harabayis is also important to remember. It's not, as the name suggests, the entire Temple Mount. There is Harabayis HaMikudash, and there's Harabayis She'eino Mikudash. Not the whole mountain was sanctified. 500 amas by 500 amas were sanctified. A square around the Beis Hamikdash, in order to distance everyone from the Beis Hamikdash, in order to give you an extra space around the Beis Hamikdash. And, as we said earlier, Goyim were even allowed to come into Harabayis. Harabayis has certain halachas that are higher than Yerushalayim itself. That's inspired by what the Torah says about Machan and Leviah, the camp of the Levim, which they camped around the Mishkan. The Mishkan is where the Kohanim were. They served in the Mishkan. The Levim were there to help them. They camped around the Mishkan. That's called the Harabayis. The Harabayis had a wall around it, a very high wall around it. And then around the Beis Hamikdash itself, there was an area called the Chel. According to the Rambam, the Chel was a wall, a 10 amma high wall around the Beis Hamikdash. Then you had the Soireg. The Soireg was a fence. It was a stone fence that was in order to show people you're coming into the place of the Beis Hamikdash. And then you had 12 steps. 12 steps either all around or just in certain areas, but there were 12 steps leading up to the Beis Hamikdash. When a person went in, usually he went in through the shadow Ezras Nashim. He wasn't yet in the actual Beis Hamikdash. In the Ezras Nashim, they implemented something which was in the third Beis Hamikdash, which is 4 rooms that don't have roofs. In the third Beis Hamikdash, we're going to see that soon in more specific. They will be used to cook the karbanis, and that's why they don't have roofs so the smoke can go up. In the second Beis Hamikdash, they used each one for different uses. We're going to see it soon a little bit more, but here they had the round steps, the 15 steps of the 15 Shir Amalis that led to Shar Niknar. And here you came into the Azara where you had the Mizbeach and the Kiyar, and here was the Heichal of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, an important thing also is that this picture seems to suggest that the Beis Hamikdash was exactly in the center. It wasn't really. There was 100 amas on the north, 265 amas on the south, 115 amas on the east, and the least 63 amas on the west. Most people came into the Beis Hamikdash where there were two gates over here, the two Chulda gates, which were named after Chulda and Neviah. In the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, she would sit between these two gates where people would come ask her questions. These two gates are the closest because Yerushalayim, we see over here Yerushalayim on the west, but Yerushalayim actually the city is mostly on the south. Most people came up from the south side, and that's why there was the most space here. The least space is on the west. You did have one gate on the west, which was called Kippainos, because there was a beautiful rose garden over there, which came from the Kedusha of the Kodesh HaKodashim and made a beautiful rose garden grow. But nevertheless, it was the least space, and of course, most people did not come from the west, because there's no reason for you to come from the side of the Kodesh HaKodashim. The second most people came from the east. The east was Shar Shushan, like we said earlier. That's where the Shushan Abira was, the picture of Shushan Abira was on it. And that's where you would come. That was the second most amount, because that's where you would come straight into the Ezras Nashim. The third most amount was from the Tzafin side, from the north side. Most people didn't come. This wasn't the area that you came from Yerushalayim. There was only one gate over here, which was called Shar Tedi. That's where people who wanted to avoid others, a person who was in mourning, person who's tameh, they would come through this gate. And this is the gates of the Harabayis. In the Beis Hamikdash itself, the Ezras Nashim has only one gate because it's not really part of the Beis Hamikdash, one gate called the Shar Ezras Nashim. These are the actual gates of the Azara. This is the Shar Niknar, with the copper gates that shone like gold. And over here, you had on the three sides the different gates. There was a gate on the north side for the Karbanis, where you brought the Karbanis in, because the Karbanis, on the north side, because Karbanis had to be shechted on the north. The Beis HaMitbachayim, the place where they actually shechted the Karbanis, was on the north side of the Mizbeach. And here is where they had the different gates. There was many gates in the Azara. Some speak about 5 gates, some speak about 7 gates, some speak about 13 gates. The Rebbe says there was all that amount. The question is which one of them were called gates, which ones weren't. But let's go now to the third Beis Hamikdash. When the Navi Yecheskel is shown the third Beis Hamikdash, the Malach, his tour guide, he says, "Vayanicheni el har gavoya me'od." He took me to a very high mountain. The Olav Kimivne Yirmi Negev, on the south, there was a city, which either means Yerushalayim, which is on the south side of the mountain, or he's referring to the actual Beis Hamikdash, which is on the south side, is where he sees it. But that is more of it's like a city, it's so big. Now, the Navi says, Har Gavoya Me'od, a very high mountain. And he's referring to the fact that it says in the Pasuk in Yeshaya, V'haya be'achris hayamim, in the end of days, in the time of Mashiach, Nachayin yiyah har beis Hashem b'rosh harim. The mountain of the house of Hashem will be set on top of all mountains. V'nisa migvais will be higher than any other mountain. And the truth is, it's an interesting thing, because essentially it should be like that now also. If this is where the Beis Hamikdash is, it's the highest spiritual place, it should also be highest physically. But that's what Galus means. The meaning of Galus is that things are not the way they really are. We see physicality as the highest. We don't see spirituality, but in truth, spirituality is the highest. When Mashiach comes, there will be the merger. There will be a full merge between physical and spiritual. In the physical world, we'll see things the way they really are. And therefore, the mountain where the Beis Hamikdash is will be the highest of mountains. Since it's the highest physically, it will also be the highest spiritually. In addition to that, in the third Beis Hamikdash, we're told, this is the pasuk in Yecheskel. He describes the way Eretz Yisrael will be split up in the time of the third Beis Hamikdash. And he says the following, Yiyah mizeh HaKodesh, Chamesh meyos, Bachamesh meyos, Meruba Saviv. There will be, surrounding the Beis Hamikdash, an area which is dedicated for the Beis Hamikdash, 500 by 500. 500 by 500 what? Not 500 by 500 amas, like it was in the second Beis Hamikdash, but rather 500 by 500 sticks, because the Navi is describing in sticks. Each stick is 6 amas, which means, if we look over here is a map of a description of at least this is the supposed place of the Beis Hamikdash, which is not necessarily. There is such a Kabbalah that where the Muslims have their mosque on top of what they call the Dome of the Rock, that's the place where the Kodesh HaKadoshim was. There is Sfarim that Ridvaz brings that, others bring it. But there is also, according to the Zohar, the place of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, nothing was and nothing will ever be built on it until the Kodesh HaKadoshim is built on it. Which means that the Kodesh HaKadoshim in the Heichal is actually on an empty area, not in a place where they built something. But regardless, however we'll look at it, this is just taking it in a way of establishing it in such a sense. Here you have the 500 amas by 500 amas, 250,000 square amas. Okay, taking the fact that an amma is about it would be around around 48 centimeters. So take it in that sense. It's six tfachim is an am. 250,000 square feet. In the time of the third Beis Hamikdash, the Harabais is going to be 3,000 amas by 3,000 amas, 6 times the size. 9 million square amas. A lot bigger. 500 amas for 500 amas, 250,000 square feet is not, square amas is not bad. It's also a nice large area, which was incidentally was all covered by different, it was all covered by canopies from the rain, from the elements, etc. But anyway, the third Beis Hamikdash is going to be 9 million square amas. Why is it going to be so large? Let's see a little bit more about the third Beis Hamikdash. Let's take a look again at the second Beis Hamikdash. As you can see, the Ezras Nashim is on the east. You come in from the east, you go up to 12 steps, you have on the east the Ezras Nashim. The Ezras Yisrael is on the west. It's called also the lower courtyard, the higher courtyard. The higher the Kedusha is, the higher you go, but you go through the Ezras Nashim, or you can go straight into the Azara from the outside. You don't need to go into the Ezras Nashim in order to get to the Azara. The Heichal is inside the Azara itself, inside the inner Azara. You have the Mizbeach, the Kiyar, and you have the Heichal. Now, let's look at the measurements of the second Beis Hamikdash. 135 amas by 135 amas, that's a square of the Ezras Nashim. Here you can see the 4 rooms on the 4 corners, which they used in the second Beis Hamikdash for other purposes. In the third Beis Hamikdash, there'll be cooking rooms. You go up the round steps, or the 15 steps, where they said the 15 Shir Amalis. Here actually is an interesting thing. You have 2 rooms. Under 15 steps means it's 7.5 amas higher. So under here, there's 2 full rooms open up. Under the Ezras Yisrael, open to Ezras Nashim. They're called the place where where they keep the musical instruments. The Levim keep their musical instruments. Here you have the gates of Shar Nikner. You come up. This is called Ezras Yisrael. This is where the 11 amas, where someone is bringing a carbon, he stands here to watch his carbon. here is called Ezras Koyanim. In fact, some say that over here, one opinion in the Mishnah says over here there was a duchan where the Koyanim would stand, where the Levim would stand and they would sing, they would play the musical instruments. It was 2.5 amas higher than the Ezras Yisrael. Okay. Here you have the Mizbeach on the south, the Kiyar in between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. Here you have the hooks and the rings and the small tables where they would check the Karbanis. This we're not going to discuss tonight. This is the Beis Hamikdash. This is where the Levim, the Kohanim would be serving, and the next day in the Beis Hamikdash, they would sleep there. They would go down into the basement. There was a basement under the entire Beis Hamikdash, besides 4 under the Mizbeach, because the Mizbeach has to be on solid ground. Everywhere else there was a basement, and there was a mikveh in this basement, where from the Beis Hamikdash they would go down in a type of elevator. They would have like an elevator drawn by a pulley system. Here you have the steps, the 12 steps of the Heichal. Actually, according to the Rambam, it's not like this, it's just 12 regular steps. Whatever the case is, you go into the Ulam. Here you have the doorway of the Ulam, the large doorway, 20 amas by 40 amas. Here are the sides of the Ulam. The Ulam is 11 amas. Here there's the 2 tables, the golden vine, the crowns on top of the doors of the Heichal, but there's nothing else in here, it's just an Ulam. And here you have the gates of the Heichal, golden gates, which are 10 amas high, 20 amas high and 10 amas wide. And here you have the pishpation. The pishpation are the small doors on the side of the big gate where they would go in and go around and open the gate from the inside. This pishpesh was on the southern side, was always closed because in the third Beis Hamikdash, Hashem is going to come in through here. The second Beis Hamikdash, they didn't have the revelation of the Shekhinah of Hashem, but in the second Beis Hamikdash, they also kept this door closed all the time. So they only went in this way. Here was Ta'im. It was like a corridor. You can go all the way around the Azara. According to Rashi, it's different rooms. According to Rambam, it's hollow in the wall. Here you have the Heichal, 20 amas by 40 amas, and here you have the Kodesh HaKadoshim, 20 by 20. Here you have 11 amas behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim, or according to some opinion, there was also 2 gates over here. Okay, that was generally the second Beis Hamikdash. The third Beis Hamikdash will be the same but very different. The Ezras Nashim is called the Chatzer HaChitzayna, the outer yard. It circles the Ezras Yisrael, the Azara Pnimis, from all sides. A very interesting thing, and perhaps if we'll understand this concept, then perhaps this also shows on the idea that the Ezras Nashim, which is seemingly the outer place, which is not really part of the Beis Hamikdash, in the second Beis Hamikdash, it's just a courtyard. In the third Beis Hamikdash, this is where everything's happening. The Heichal itself is inside the Ezras Nashim. It's open to the Azara, but it's in the Ezras Nashim. That's the whole idea of the third Beis Hamikdash, connecting the physical and spiritual, the higher and lower, making them all become one. Now, when you walk in, you can walk in from 3 sides. There's 3 gates, east, north, and south. There's no gates from the west. On the east, when you walk in, this is called the Shara Isain, the main gate where you come in. Isain also means that this is where the sun comes from on the east. Isain also means this is the main gate where everyone comes in from. This Shara Isain, the eastern gate, had 12 steps, whereas the northern and southern gates have 7 steps leading to them. Why does the eastern gate have 12 steps? So one of the suggestions is because the Beis Hamikdash was not built on a flat place. It was built on the steps of the mountain. So now in the north and south isn't where you're going up the mountain. There's less to go up. On the east, you're going up more, so that's why it's more steep. There's 12 steps. Sure, there's other reasons and deeper reasons. It's interesting, the symbolism of 12 and 7 both show on the physical nature of the world, which is the idea of this Chatzer HaChitzayna, the outer courtyard. This outer courtyard of the third Beis Hamikdash, we're going to see it soon more specifically, has something that the second Beis Hamikdash didn't have. If you remember the ulam, the hallway is something that only the Beis Hamikdash had, because the Beis Hamikdash is established. The third Beis Hamikdash, which is the most established, doesn't just have an ulam on the way into the Heichal. Every entrance has an ulam, a hallway leading you in, which we'll see. On the east, the north, and the south, you have hallways. On the side of the door, there's time, there's small rooms, as we'll see later. There's also a second floor. A second floor is like a porch around, which goes till the gates, not on the west side, or some say there is a porch also on the west side, but there's definitely no rooms on the west side. On the east, the north, and the south, there's 4 rooms, 5 rooms. Here, 5 rooms. Here, 5. Here, 5. Here, there's altogether 30 rooms. Maybe they're offices. Maybe there are other things. I don't know. But that's what there's going to be there, a second floor. Here is the 4 rooms on the 4 corners. But unlike the second Beis Hamikdash, where the 4 rooms on the 4 corners were on the outside, on the third Beis Hamikdash, the 4 rooms on the 4 corners, the back 2 rooms, are actually right near the back of the Heichal. The inner Azara is 100 amas by 100 amas. So if we look, it's actually extremely symmetrical. It's from this gate until the inner Azara is 100 amas. These buildings, which are 3-floor buildings, which are 50 amas wide and 100 amas long, and we'll talk about them soon. These buildings are 100 amas. There's 100 amas from here, from the wall till the wall is 100 amas. From this wall till this wall is 100 amas. From this wall till this wall is 100 amas. From this wall to this wall is 100 amas. From here till here is 100 amas. From here till here is 100 amas. Not including, so it's not exactly, because here there's 317 amas. There's an extra few amas on the sides. And here it's 312 amas. So 312 is 317, not an exact square. Let's go and see a little bit more and better the ideas of the third Beis Hamikdash. As you go in over here to the gates, which we'll examine a little more, you have over here a porch. The porch has 5 rooms going until these corner rooms. These corner rooms are 40 amas by 30 amas. This is, like we said, this is where they cook the korbanos. Here you have each, in between each of them, you have the porch. Some say also a porch on this side, but just no rooms. Over here you have the entrance hall. In the outer courtyard, it's on the inside of it is the entrance hall. The doorposts of the entrance hall are stone pillars that are topped by golden crowns that look like a golden palm tree. The height of the gate is 50 amas. The height of these pillars are 50 amas. The height of the bottom of these porches is 50 amas. You have here these buildings, which we'll talk about later. A person would come in through here. He would go up the 12 steps on the east, or the 7 steps on either the north and the south. He would go up this 8 steps of the inner Azara, also on 3 sides, east, north, and south. Very similar entrance halls, also 3 rooms, also halls, and also steps in between the hall and in between the rooms were the steps. The steps were always in between the rooms. So here the steps are from outside. Here the steps are after the hall, before the gate. And here you have the Mizbeach. Now, in order where they would shecht in the third Beis Hamikdash, or where they're going to shecht in the third Beis Hamikdash, is going to be in a room that's open up to the gate. It's actually outside of the Azara, but it's considered, the Kedusha is considered like inside the Azara. A room which the opening is towards the gate so that people don't see. And it's on the north side over here, so people don't see the blood and the guts of the animals, so that people don't see that it's kept clean, the Azara itself, and also because the person who brings a carbon before he shechts, before it was shechted, he would do smicha, he would say vidui. People don't hear him saying vidui. Here you have the Heichal. It's in the outer courtyard, but with its opening to the inner courtyard. let's go a little further and see the idea. This is the model that they made of the third Beis Hamikdash. Here you see the 3 rooms. The doors are next to the stairs. So you go around the stairs, you go into these rooms. What are these rooms for? Nobody knows. Most pictures and models make them as short rooms. Soon we'll see another option. Here's a 50 high gateway, and here you can see the hallways, and here you can see these 4 buildings, which we'll discuss soon in a moment. Our time's almost up. And we can check out now a image that we've made of these rooms. Now, here they're made different than the other model, and I don't know if they'll be like that. We'll find out when we get there. But there's a possibility that, and this is especially according to the opinion of the Rambam, the time doesn't mean rooms, it means hollows in the hall, in the wall. And therefore, the possibility would be these rooms, one goes in from here, here's the steps, that they're much taller rooms, and when the Navi describes the top of the gate at 50 amas, and he describes it as being part of the rooms, that would be an arch that goes from the domed roof to the domed roof, an arch which is 50 amas high, so that this is actually the height of the gate, because when the Navi describes the rooms, he describes them as being part of the gate. You'd go up the 12 steps here. Actually, this isn't 12 because this is the northern gate. Here there's 7 steps. What are these rooms? Remember these rooms on top. What do you do with them? How do you get to them? 50 amas high. 50 amas high is like a 5-story building or more. Perhaps even a 7-story building. How do you get here? A ta, usually the meaning of a ta, these are called ta'im. A ta usually is a way to get somewhere, to take you somewhere. And perhaps these ta'im are rooms that lead you in, as far as the Rambam explains. The wall itself is hollow, and in the wall, as we know, the third Beis Hamikdash is called Barzel because it will elevate every aspect of the physical world, even the negativity. And definitely there'll be technology in the third Beis Hamikdash, and if even in the second Beis Hamikdash, according to many opinions, there were elevators, there definitely will be in the third Beis Hamikdash. It'll probably be a very nice type of elevator because we'll be able to develop it according to all the best things that we can have now in 2020. But the idea is that the elevator inside the wall, that's perhaps what will take you to the rooms on the other side. It will take you up there and also enable you to see these beautiful crowns that are here on the inside. That's why they're next to every single gate. On both sides of the gates, you have these. These also have the domes and the pillars. We didn't finish making those, but it has the exact same as these. Their hallways are parallel to each other. Let's look at the site. Here you have actually, this is the actual height of a person as he goes up the steps. You'll see over here the better view of the gate, but then this is when you go in. This hallway protrudes into the Beis Hamikdash 11 amas, which means you walk through the 6 amma thickness. The wall is 6 amas thick. You walk in between the 6 amma thickness, or the more than that, the 11 amma thickness of the rooms. So it's 11 amas, 6 amas, and 11 amas. You're actually walking through a hallway as you go in to each entrance. You're walking through a hallway of 23 amas, quite a long hallway, and then is when you enter into the actual Azara of the Kodesh HaKadosh of the Beis Hamikdash, or the inner Azara of the Beis Hamikdash. Another important thing in the third Beis Hamikdash is that the Mizbeach, there'll also be one kier like the Mishkan and the second Beis Hamikdash. The Mizbeach in the second Beis Hamikdash, and perhaps in the first Beis Hamikdash also, the Mizbeach didn't have the Yesod going all around. Because part of it was in the portion of Yehuda, the Mizbeach had to be in the portion of Binyamin. In the third Beis Hamikdash, the Yesod will go all around the foundation of the Mizbeach, and it will go up 2 amas rather than just 1. So that's where the difference is. According to Rashi, the height of the entire Mizbeach will be 11 amas rather than 10. So there will be differences. That's how the Tosfos Yom Tov explains when we say Mizbeach Chadash B'Tzion Tachin, make us a new Mizbeach, meaning a different Mizbeach than the one that used to be. Let's look at these rooms. What are these? What are these? These are called Leshachis, quite huge. They're huge structures, almost as big as the Heichel itself. 50 amas wide, 100 amas long, and 3 stories. What are they? Rashi, in the only place in the entire third Beis Hamikdash, 3 times when Rashi is describing these structures, he says, I don't understand anything about them. I don't know anything about it. And then Rashi goes on to say, I didn't have a teacher or a helper to teach me about this third Beis Hamikdash. I only said the way they taught me from heaven. So from heaven, they didn't show Rashi what this was. But perhaps there's an option if we look at it. If you look at the description of the Navi describes a 3-story building which has triangles on top on the roof. Look at the Navi, you'll see the description in Yecheskel. Rashi says, I don't understand it. The Navi also describes that the top floor is narrower than the second and the first. The Rebbe told us that the main Beis Hamikdash of Bavel, of Galus, is going to be directly connected to the third Beis Hamikdash. Now let's think, how will it be directly connected? If it's connected on the outside, this isn't really the third Beis Hamikdash. This is the Ezras Nashim. It doesn't have the Kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash. It has to be connected on the inside. Where is it? And perhaps these are the buildings that Yecheskel saw, the 3-story buildings, which Yecheskel describes that they also have a basement and that they have triple triangular roofs. In this sense, this main Beis Hamikdash of Galus is going to be directly connected to the third Beis Hamikdash, the Azara of the third Beis Hamikdash. And according to Chazal, according to the Rashi, the inside of this building has the same Kedusha like the Azara. There's also a room, an entrance that leads from this building straight into the time of the Azara. In fact, when the Navi describes Mashiach, he calls the Nasi, and he describes that he has a little room right over here. And he says when he's going to come into the Beis Hamikdash, he shouldn't go in through these leshachos, through these buildings, which means that there is an entrance into the Heichal from these buildings, but he should rather go through the Azara, so he should go in an open way through the Ulam. When we talk about a basement, we can also understand something else that the Rebbe says. The Rebbe says that through this, all the other shuls will be connected to the Beis Hamikdash. How does one shul connect all the other shuls? And here you can understand that this is directly connected. It has a basement. The basement goes all the way under the Beis Hamikdash like it did in the second, till it goes to the outside, like it was in the second. On the outside, all the other shuls are connected to this. So they're outside, but they're connected to this building, which is directly connected. That's also why we learned that the Harabais has to be so much larger, because it needs space for all the shuls. All the shuls will be on Harabais. Okay, so if you want to learn more about it, we were only able to give a limited amount. Check out the website, bhmatters.info. We have over there everyday shiurim about the Beis Hamikdash. Split into the shiurim, and the B'ez Hashem will have everything, all the aspects that we can to learn in depth, according to the Rebbe Sichas, the Rambam, and the Mishnayos, as well as the Psukim of Yecheskel. bhmatters.info. Anybody had questions? I don't know how to, if you want to unmute, so we can.
I opened the chat for anyone that has questions.
Okay, that means everything's clear. That's good, I guess.
Fine.
Good. The main thing is it should be Afchu Yam Meila Mesasin or Simcha with the building of the third Beis Hamikdash. We should see with the right will have answers to all the questions that we have about it.
Fine. Yasher Rabbi Wagner. Thank you very much for all the time you put into it, for the presentation. It's beautiful. I'm sure many people enjoyed it. If anyone missed any part of the presentation, or if you'd like the recording, you can email me at lyyd@gmail.com. I posted it on the chat. It will be uploaded, and it will be uploaded to YouTube. So, all the best, gesund, and we should be zeichet to celebrate the third Beis Hamikdash, and Tisha B'Av should be Yafiyam El Tzasin L'Simcha. Sei gesund, and all the best.